Sneakers and Cleats, the podcast.
Welcome back to the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. This is Thursday, January 2nd, episode 160. Happy New Year to everybody. Happy New Year, gentlemen.
Happy New Year, one and all.
Everyone have a good day yesterday?
Yes, at work. Still trying to figure out what's the big deal about the first day. I mean, we're going to have 365 of these.
Hey, last year, 366 of them. So
There you go.
before we get started, I want to wish everybody out in New Orleans well. Obviously, the terror attacks that happened there yesterday, so hearts go out to everybody in New Orleans. Canceled the Sugar Bowl. Sugar Bowl actually being played right now out there, so hopefully everybody gets the help that they need out in New Orleans. Go to a happier subject. Well, happy if you're a Texas Longhorns fan. We'll talk a lot about the Peach Bowl today. Longhorns beat the Sun Devils 39-31. Talk about the game. Talk about the no call that some say was targeting, some say it wasn't. I'm a little biased, so I think it's targeting, but whatever. And semifinal matchup coming up between Ohio State and the Longhorns now that is set. So we'll also talk about the Cowboys, Mike McCarthy, his future. He talked about that a little bit today in his press conference, so we'll talk about if he should come back to the Cowboys. Also, a lot of free agents that are going to be – or a lot of guys that are going to be free agents, for the Cowboys. Talk about them. Plus, the Spurs beat the Clippers at home on Tuesday, and that was probably their best game of the season. You and I were sitting here watching it. Putting highlights together. That was their best, most complete game of the season. So we'll talk about that, what that means for this young team. Plus, how concerned are we over their inability to win on the road with 5 of their next 6 coming away from home. So we'll talk about all that. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone, subscribe to the YouTube channel, News 4 Fox SA. If you're so inclined, download, rate, review the podcast on your favorite podcast app. Helps us out a lot. No trivia today. We're going to get right into it. Peach Bowl. So Texas defeats ASU 39-31 in double overtime. It was an instant classic. It really was. No matter who you're rooting for, it was a heck of a ball game. Basically, looked like the brakes might come off early in that game, about 6-7 minutes in. ASU goes down the field, lucky that their first punt wasn't blocked. Ended up getting a first down, get 3, and then 2 plays for the first drive for the Texas Longhorns was touchdown, punt return for a touchdown. It looks like everything's going to looks like it was going to be
one of those days.
One of those days. And then it kind of reminded me of the Penn State game where there was an ability or a moment there where Penn State could really put Boise State away, and they ended up fumbling, and all the momentum went towards Boise. That's how it kind of felt. The Arizona State defense played extremely well.
Oh, yeah.
I think they kept him in the game, and really, besides Cam Scadaboo had to get his footing in the second half, but it was all Arizona State's defense that kept the Longhorns off balance pretty much all day.
What I was impressed with was they looked from being physically overmatched to all of a sudden they just kept kind of pounding the rock, so to speak, and at the end of that ball game, they were imposing their will physically on Texas, and I didn't think that was going to be possible in that football game. So,
even I didn't think that was going to be possible.
Yeah.
You're playing it's a Big 12 team versus an SEC team. It's their Texas's offensive line outweighs our defensive line. I say our because I'm a Sun Devil fan. Outweighs ASU's defensive line by like 60 pounds each. They're just a bigger SEC program, and they did not play their best game on the offensive line for Texas. Like, ASU's defense got after them for the first probably 55 minutes of that game.
Yeah, I mean, every time I watched Texas this year, they were just able to run the ball, and it didn't matter who it was, right? Their first-string running back, the third, the fourth, whatever they're at now with their depleted running back situation. But the fact that Texas ran the ball as much as they tried to yesterday and had very little to show for it.
Yeah.
It was a very, very impressive performance on many fronts by ASU.
I mean, Quintravion Wisner having 18 carries for 45 yards, 2.5 yards a carry. Jadon Blue, 4 yards on 4 carries, 1 yard per carry. I mean, they had 53 yards total on 30 carries yesterday. I mean, it was insane because that's what we all thought going into that game was Texas is the more physical team. They're going to impose their will on this Big 12 defense, and it was completely the other way around, which was even surprising to me as a Sun Devil fan. This is what Sark said after the game, so let's hear from him before we chat a little bit more.
Just proud of these guys because you not every game is going to be pretty. Not every game is just going to go exactly how you want it to go. And there's going to be plenty of stuff that we're going to look at this tape and say we got to do better and be better. But the one thing I won't have to say is that our toughness and our fight doesn't need to be better. And if there's one thing that you want as a calling card for your team is just that. And so I think it's a tribute to these guys up here and their leadership and the culture that we have and their ability to stay calm through the storm and execute when, like I said, when our best was needed.
I thought I think he's right. They showed a lot of fight. The Longhorns did, because when you go down 31-24 in overtime, you just gave up a 16-point lead. You're on 4th and 13 for your season. 4th and 13, you need a first down. They end up getting the touchdown, end up winning the game. But to see the fight that their team gave was extremely impressive to me as well.
Agree. I mean, I can't deny anything of what you just said. I mean, it was just a heck of a ball game, to your point, and again, it's just sad that ASU had to lose this football game, and obviously I got more skin in the game in the Texas department than I do the ASU, but I mean, the fact that they put and scored that many points and had over 500 yards of total offense against that defense.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. 510 total yards on the best, probably the best or second best defense in the entire country.
I mean, statistically, number one, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's them, Georgia, Notre Dame. The fact that the ball was moving and you were able to have big plays and move the ball between the 20s and just really not finish in the red zone.
I mean, just the play calling where they may have been outmatched in certain areas, just when things weren't really going their way, they came up with a little gadget here or there, and it was just a masterful performance, masterful coaching job, and, the effort that Scattaboo exerted in that football game was infectious, uplifting, and contagious. I mean,
well, I was going to ask you,
that was impressive. I mean, he backed up everything that he said this week. It was not something I thought I was going to see.
Yeah, I mean, he won the offensive MVP on the losing team for the first time in Peach Bowl history. That's how good Cameron Scattaboo was yesterday. He led the team in touchdown passes, in rushing touchdowns, in receiving yards, in rushes, in rushing yards. He dominated that game yesterday, and he was exhausted. You could see exactly how tired he was because
he even scored a touchdown when somebody carried him into the end zone, which is illegal.
I mean, we're not going to call targeting. We're not going to call that either, I guess. So.
Oh, no, I'm sure we'll get to the targeting thing.
We will.
But, I mean, yes. I mean, it was inspiring. Again, everybody on that Texas team was looking at one guy to kind of stick it to yesterday. And, I mean, the fact that he was taking on guys that were 3 times his size and, exerting his force on the other team, it was very, 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 very impressive.
I wasn't impressed by Quinn Ewers. I thought he played well enough to win the game. I didn't think he played his best game by any means. But, I mean, for those who watched the game, you saw the 4th and 13 throw was phenomenal. It's for their season. ASU comes out in a cover 0 look. He checks to a max protection, and he finds Golden. I think it was Golden behind the defense in the end zone on the corner post, and it was just a beautiful throw and beautifully executed by him. You heard Sark after the game say that they practiced that play against that look, and it was all about preparation. And so Quinn knew exactly what to do because they had practiced it, they repped it, and Quinn did exactly what he was supposed to do. They won the game, and I think eyes are opened a little bit on Quinn Ewers throwing for 322 of their 375 yards.
Yeah, I mean, he was 20 of 30, something like that. But
20 of 30, 322.
It's the last 2 throws everybody's going to remember, right?
100%.
I mean, it was just money, dime.
Yeah, and the pick he threw was a bad throw. The pick he threw that really in between the ASU touchdowns was a pretty bad decision.
It was. That was also targeting.
That was. No, actually, that one, I think.
Not on the guy that got the interception. It was the guy that cleaned up.
I don't think they called that one because you could tell that the ASU defender was trying to ease up. You could see his body try and slow down, but his momentum carried him right into the guy.
Okay, so I know we're going to get into.
All right, let's just get to it. Let's just get to it now.
So, I mean, to me, when I look at targeting, and I know, Gene Steratore even came out and is going to side with you, and I can't say that it's not targeting, but to me, it's like I didn't never see this guy. I didn't see Taffy, whatever his name is,
that's the same.
Leave his feet and lurch, and that just didn't look like classic targeting to me. I'm not saying it's not by the letter of the law. I don't know. It was just there were a lot of missed calls in that game, and I think to just kind of, I know it's all the internet rage right now that Texas, was gifted a playoff game, but there were plenty of calls that went against Texas, or no calls that went against Texas.
There was also a block in the back on the punt return touchdown. We won't talk about that one.
And there was a hold on a Texas receiver while he's running down the field, and they didn't
Whose
call
side are you
that.
on?
I'm
just kidding.
I'm just doing tit for tat here.
Just based on just talking about that one targeting no call. If you didn't watch the game, it was 3rd and 15. Quintavion Stovall, ASU receiver, goes over the middle. Ball's tipped. He catches the ball, turns around, and there's a face mat, or there's a helmet right here. Hits him right in the helmet. It was besides the helmet to helmet contact, it was a good clean tackle. Wrapped him up. Perfect textbook tackle. The letter of the law says that's a targeting. In the moment, like when the play was going on, I didn't think it was a targeting personally. When you see the replays and after review, and it's defenseless receiver, head-to-head contact on a defenseless receiver, letter of the law, it's a targeting. And so to even go to review and then come back and say, nope, no targeting, 4th and 5, ASU has to punt the ball back, and then the Longhorns miss their second field goal. To not get that call in that situation, I think will haunt Arizona State fans for a long time, because after the game, literally everybody in college football media and officiating crews everywhere are like, that's a targeting. If Gene Steratore and like other people came out and were like, yeah, it's really questionable. No, he literally said, quote unquote, it met every criteria. And it wasn't called. So that's going to haunt everybody for a long time. Would ASU have made the field goal? I have no idea. They're one of the worst kickers in the country. He was good yesterday, but he's one of the worst field goal kickers in the country. The ASU literally held tryouts mid-season because they couldn't kick a football. He's horrible. And so, would they have made it in that situation? I have no idea. But the fact that they didn't even get the chance will haunt a lot of ASU fans, and I think that's the take on it.
It just stinks because, they played so well, right? And they masterfully, imposed their will, managed the game correctly, positively, got the most out of a, pretty pedestrian day from a really good quarterback that they have. It's a shame, you're right, that you would have a call that all of a sudden everybody's going to glean in on that and say, this was the difference in the ball game, when, again, it was a lot more than that. But, again, hats off to ASU, because statistically, they're right there, and you can make the argument they were the better team yesterday.
I think you can make a really strong argument that they were the better team. Yeah. Outside of those, you take that first 8 minutes away, they dominated that football game in more ways than one.
They did. And the other side of it is Texas's kicker.
Oh, man. Is
he going to miss 2 more? So it's hard to, really kind of weigh in on all this stuff and say, if this would have happened, that would have happened. But, yeah, it's hard to not look at the stats and then with your eyeballs and say, well, I'm not so sure the best team won today.
Yeah, you own the time of possession, 38-22. That helps.
That's unbelievable.
That's going to happen when you get a punt return for a touchdown. You run 21 plays in the first half,
but that's
Texas
16
did.
minutes. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yes, game clock. We're talking about.
Yeah, Cam Scadaboo by himself had more total yardage than Georgia had in the SEC championship game against that defense, that Texas defense, which is insane to say. Speaking of the kicker, I saw something this morning that I thought was interesting. A lot's being made of the Sark, going over to him and talking about him, or talking to him, smiling, saying, you got this, all that stuff. The ASU training girls walked in front of Bert Auburn when he was warming up. And so there's a lot of talk that kickers are creatures of habit. And so if you interrupt their flow like that, interrupt their rhythm and their cadence, their routine is the word I'm looking for, that kind of messed up Auburn. Do you think that that's good or bad that Sark kind of did that? Saban said today he never talked to his kickers. He was just like, go through your routine, go kick the ball.
Right. I really don't know. That's one of those things. We'll see what happens the next time, right?
He's not going to do it again, I guarantee.
If it was me, and obviously I'm not a kicker, but if I have a 4-foot putt, I don't want a pep talk from somebody before I'm going to do it. So
I guess that's fair. Bob, what was you have any takes about the game, the performance, anything on the digital platforms here?
Well, one thing, and we had discussed this before we started rolling. Simon says.
Simon says.
Simon says.
Okay.
About the so-called targeting. He said no crown used, and you had some thoughts on that.
Well, that's one of the. There's multiple ways to get a targeting. It doesn't have to have a crown of the helmet. If it's a defenseless receiver, and you go helmet to helmet, which it was, then it qualifies as a targeting. It doesn't need a launch every time. It doesn't need crown of the helmet. There's multiple ways to get a targeting.
There's a guy on Twitter. His name is Brian Edwards 63, and I saved this because this guy's tweet kind of encapsulates everything. These are the calls that went against Texas in this game.
I'm not saying there weren't calls. Like there was definitely calls that went both ways.
You like that? You like that?
This is really good for a audio audience.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying. It's like, look, this is like scratch and sniff TV, y'all. You can go to Twitter now and go find this guy's tweet because he does a nice job kind of compartmentalizing what happened in that ball game that went against Texas or things that weren't called for the Longhorns.
There's 100% calls that didn't go both ways. Like there's missed calls. I don't think it was a well officiated game at all. I think that officiating crew was not very good. I think ultimately in the college football playoffs, the officiating has been kind of off. In that Boise State game, there was 23 flags. Like, keep them in your pocket. But it does stink that a classic game like that is going to be mired in controversy because of that call. Like Texas won the game, and they were the better team.
On the scoreboard.
On the scoreboard.
Yep.
That's all that matters. They won the game. They're going to the next round. ASU had a 4th and 13 that they could have gotten and could have won the game, and they didn't do it. It does stink that classic awesome of a game is going to be talked about as the call that wasn't called.
I think it will for ASU fans. I don't think Texas fans are going to remember any of that other than the fact that
I think they're over it.
They're on to Ohio State. But I think the lesson for Texas is if you think ASU was physical,
yeah,
where do you get a load of Ohio State?
As a Arizona State fan and an alumni, I could not be more proud of that team, though.
As you should be.
Could not be more proud.
Did not see that coming. 2 touchdown dogs, and obviously further travel. You had 2 guys that I don't know if you'd call it trash talk or just guys that are very confident in their own abilities, but the fact that they pretty much backed it up. I mean, for Scatterboo to say, I don't think there's anybody that can stop me, and then you're playing the number 1 defense. I mean, you talk about the huevos rancheros on that guy, and then to go back it up like that. Dude, I mean, come on. That's we haven't seen anything like that in quite some time.
42 yards passing and a touchdown, 30 carries, 143 yards and 2 touchdowns, 8 catches, 99 yards, no touchdowns through the air.
He looks like Rudy if you're just looking at him. I mean,
like, goodness gracious. Yep. Cam went off. I think that ASU played a good game. That could be argued that they were the better team on the field, and I think that they earned some respect in the national media, national spotlight. I think that there's a lot of people who fall back on the SEC. It just means more, and the SEC is the better conference, which it is. But when you just say all SEC teams are better than any Big 12 team, I think you're wrong at that point.
Right.
I think that ASU just showed that the top level teams in these other conferences can still compete with some of the best teams in the country, and it's still a Power 4, not a Power 2.
Well said.
Let's get to Cowboys stuff. Anything else? Actually, quick thought on Ohio State and Texas. Do you think that ASU, or do you think that Texas can win that game?
Can they win?
They're 4.5-point dogs.
I think, having maybe, that they're right up the road has got to help some, I would think. But, man, I don't know, man. After watching that performance yesterday by Ohio State, I mean, they got tons of receivers. Mm-hmm. It's already DBU. They play a physical brand of football. I don't know. Some of this is sort of like the football version of the Baton Death March, right? I mean, the fact that you're going to have to line up and play another one of these slugfest street fight games and the physicality that it takes to move, to survive and move on is it's really something. And the fact that we're talking about uncharted territory for these college kids, that's trying to play a 17-game schedule. And, just the time and the management of having to, how do you traverse your way through a course of a long season like this and still be able to bring your A game every single week like this? I mean, and I think we said it going in. I mean, these games will be won in the trenches more than likely, and the more physical, more healthy teams are going to be the ones that survive and advance.
Yeah, I mean, the way that Ohio State has won in dominating fashion over one the best team in the country in Oregon, and then how they won that first round game, it's like, good luck.
Hey, you got to know that Texas, though, can do what Michigan did. Texas has a personnel to play defense the same way Michigan did, and Michigan beat up Ohio State. All right, they beat them up, and Texas has a very good defensive line, and so what they'll do is they're going to go a ton of zone. They're going to play probably maybe even quarters. You know what I mean? They're going to dare Ohio State to run. And I think Texas has the personnel to stop Ohio State's run game. So that's going to be really tough. And Texas is going to run all over Ohio State.
Well, it does. It seems like anybody that isn't in blue and yellow gets
maize and
messed up by
maize. You
by
call
Ohio
it corn.
State. Yeah. If Texas can change their uniforms up and wear blue and yellow, then maybe they have a better chance at winning that game, because it seems like whenever
Coach Day's kryptonite.
Yeah, whenever Ohio State plays Michigan, they crap all over themselves.
But here's the hard thing: like every game that Ryan Day wins now is making it harder and harder to fire him.
You can't fire him.
And
he has the best winning percentage over the last 6 years. He's 68-10.
He lost to Michigan 4 times. That's all. That's the only thing that matters at Ohio State.
He's
and he
68-10.
He needs to go.
He's not going to get fired.
Well, he should be.
There's no chance. I wouldn't say there's no chance. There's less.
There's a good chance.
I don't think so.
Still a chance.
He wins the national championship. He gets
if he wins
fired.
the national championship, we won't be able to fire him.
Oh, poo.
His hate is stronger than his love. Can't you see that?
I want him to go.
Yes.
Before we get off the college football subject, I got a text from my wife a little earlier about a remote in the living room.
Yes.
So,
that's what I understand. Yes, please share.
Yeah, so I got a text. I was watching the game at home yesterday in my living room with a couple of friends and Jordan, my wife, and I was not drinking. So when I watch games, it's very.
Does that make this even worse?
It might. So when I watch games, obviously, I'm just hooping and hollering, and it's my team, so I'm rooting for them heavily. Apparently, I broke the remote. Jordan texted me. She said the remote doesn't work, and I said the living room, and she's like, "Yeah." The back doesn't go on anymore. It doesn't stay on, and I was like, "Use some tape." Why? How'd that happen? And she was like, "You have a tendency to throw the remote when we're watching."
But let me ask you this: Can there be a victory without any chance of defeat? Like, there's no way that the remote is going to kick your double snakes and punch you back. So, like, how can you take victory over a remote? Like, you're gonna have to find something else that has a chance of maybe swinging back.
I don't know. I think you should stick
I should
with the
stick to the remote. I think. Yeah. I think the remote is fine.
I mean, poor
I'm not going
sweet
to go.
Jordan,
I'm not
she
going to
made
go
all
find a
those little-
wildebeest and battle that. Like,
Yeah, right. Those great little ball things that she made.
oh,
those,
the cake balls.
Dude, those were elite.
Yeah, she's.
I mean, how? Be
those
nice to
were
her
good.
remote.
They're
Oh my
really
God,
good.
those were good.
Yes,
so
be nice to your wife's remote.
I didn't throw it at her. Like,
I didn't say that you did. I'm just saying, be kind. If she can make cake balls like that, the least you can do is be kind to the remote.
yeah, we can thank her mom, Lisa, for that recipe. Those are so good. It's just little bites of heaven. Anyway, I'm actually kind of mad about that because she gave all of them away and she kept like 6 at home, and I was like, Jordan,
6?
what about your husband?
6 is not enough.
Yeah, she kept like 6, and she's like, "Yeah, those are for you and me." I was like, "No, those are for me. Like those aren't for you at all. I'm sorry. We're gonna have to make more." Anyway, so let's go to the Cowboys here. Cowboys will end their season on Sunday against the Commanders. Might be the last game for a lot of Cowboys, both on the roster and in the coaching staff. Mike Zimmer, his contract's up, obviously. Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy was asked today in his press conference about if it'll be bittersweet and what the emotions will be like. This is what he had to say.
Yeah, no, great point. I'll be honest with you. I go to the stadium much earlier, at this time in my career than I used to. And, I won a Super Bowl in that home locker room at AT&T. So I have a very strong emotional attachment that it hits me every time I walk in there, every time I walk out. So, yeah, I'm definitely aware of it. And but, yeah, I know you got Zimmer up here. I am not. You're not getting me today. So, but no, I'm not thinking about it right now. But yeah, I'm definitely in tune with that.
It made Zimmer cry a little bit earlier this week. But you think about it, and it's like they're still people.
Yeah, everyone
wants to run Mike McCarthy out of town because they're 8-9. It might be 8-9 or 7-10 this year, but he's done an admirable job. 12-win seasons the last 3 years. They just can't win the big one. And it's not just him that can't win the big one. It's every other coach that they've had for the last 30 years.
Agree. I just wonder if he's going to be back. I mean, he said enough this week, kind of reading the tea leaves, when he was asked earlier, about being a coaching free agent. He said, I'm not going there. I'm going to finish the race. Said all the right things to try to dodge the question. But he did let out that it's been a tough year working under a one-year deal for both he and his staff. So, I just wonder at the end of this if that's going to be like if he feels like he had to work under some really trying conditions, that maybe he might be better served going to another team that A, is going to give him more years on a contract, but B, also, how good has this guy been with a depleted roster?
Yeah.
I mean, you take all these teams that are going to be looking for coaches that you could say, well, something's not happening, right? Because of, we've had too many injuries, or we just don't have enough talent, or we just don't feel like the right coach is in place. I mean, he can go into another situation where he can be the hero, if he wins somehow, flips it and takes a losing team and they win 9 games next year or even 10 games. And again, is it going to be easier to roster build somewhere else where you don't have some of these colossal contracts that are bogging your roster down? I mean, He proved he was at his very best when this roster, at least on paper, was at its very least.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. 2 separate questions. I think they have different answers as well. If you're now Jerry Jones, I just made you the owner of the Cowboys, would you bring Mike McCarthy back as your first option?
I don't know. I don't know that a fresh start wouldn't be better for everybody, for the fan base in Dallas and for McCarthy personally. And, I saw somebody spitballing the other day, like, wouldn't it be something if they hired, Detroit's flashy OC
Ben
and then bring Zimmer back as the DC? Zimmer admitted that he was trying to be the nice guy early on and didn't run things the way he would have because he wanted to be respectful for the fact that this was a top 5 defense last year. I thought that was pretty honest to him to say that, but then now he's got it to where he wants it, and this defense looks and is playing differently, even with all the injuries. So, would that invigorate Cowboy fans? It is. It's new. It's fresh. It's different. It's not going to look the same because there's a new guy that's calling the plays and making it look different. And, how much of what this OC has learned in Detroit did he learn from Dan Campbell about, the will to win and all of the things that make Dan Campbell such a great coach. So I don't know. I don't know if I would hire him back, at this point. And maybe it would be best for everybody to just start anew, fresh start for McCarthy, go win and go to playoff games and do what you do best somewhere else and get a new fresh start for the Cowboys too with a new head coach. I honestly don't know how to answer your question.
Well, my other question is, do you think McCarthy would want to come back? Dallas, being the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys comes with a lot of things that you don't get in New Orleans or, I'm just thinking of places that have coaches openings. I don't know. I don't know if I was Mike McCarthy, I don't know if Jerry Jones said, "Here's your new contract. We'd love to have you back," if I would say yes. Is that crazy to think?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, not that he's not respectful for the opportunity or for the time that he's had here or any of that. I don't think that has anything to do with any of this. But again, to me, you're right. This job does come with a lot of extra stuff that you don't have to deal with somewhere else. You know, the crazy fandom, the attention, all that stuff. And, you know, what is that doing at the McCarthy home to his wife and kids every week? And, you know, he's got broad shoulders. He's more than equipped to handle what comes his way as being the head coach of a football team. But I don't know. Like I said, I just think in my heart, it tells me maybe a fresh start would be best for everybody involved.
Yeah, I mean,
assuming that McCarthy would then go get another job.
Yeah, as long as that fresh start isn't, you know, in New York with Jets or something, that would be even worse.
That would be kind of cool.
I think I'd much rather take a job for Jerry Jones than working for Woody Johnson.
Well, maybe that, but I mean, again, if you take if the Giants have an opening, and I don't know that they will, but I mean, using them as an example, I mean, literally nowhere to go from.
The Giants are a crapshoot.
But they got a pretty good defense, so you start with that.
Bob, anything for now?
Well, I mean that's the talk in the chat right now. So what team do you think should offer him a deal?
I think he'd be really good in New Orleans. He has ties to New Orleans. Darren Rizzi's not going to get that full-time head coaching job. But why wouldn't you want to go to New Orleans?
I think, you know, if they could figure out a way with the Bears ownership and their GM situation, like I don't know that anybody runs a organization from a coaching standpoint any better than Mike McCarthy. Everything is spelled out. You know what's expected. You know where you're supposed to be. It's organizationally, and the way he communicates it's not common. Mm-hmm. And so for whatever people out there in Cowboy fandom think that he's not, you know, and I think Packer fans probably thought the same thing at the end of his tenure, but the way the guy runs an organization and runs the ship, I think would serve somebody like the Bears very, very well.
I agree. I think the Bears would be a really good option for him. The Saints would be a good option. I don't think the Jets are a good option for anybody. We just don't know what jobs are going to be open. Like, is Vegas going to part ways with Antonio Pierce? But do you want to work for Tom Brady and Mark Davis at this point? Like, I don't know who. You have to look at who the ownership is. And I heard that from Sean Payton when he was evaluating whether he wanted to go to Denver or not. They just got a new ownership group, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to win. You have to have a simpatico relationship between your head coach, your GM, and your ownership group. And if the ownership group is a mess, which it seems like that list is growing day by day, it's like, do you really want to go work for that person? I mean, you heard it from the head coach of the Nuggets when Mike Brown got fired. Like, that's it's a bad person to work for. And you have to take that into consideration. And Jerry might have a lot of faults, but he's a good person to work for. So
yeah, and I mean, you know, and Jerry's, you know, they let McCarthy in on the draft, and McCarthy is set on the record that he's had more input on the draft than he ever has at any point in his career working here with the Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll talk about free agents later. There's a list of 27.
Although
guys.
They didn't draft him a running back.
Maybe this year they'll draft Cam Scatterbo.
But I don't know that there was a running back out there to defend the Cowboys a little bit there.
I don't know about that one.
Any of them guys achieving?
Yeah, there's a lot of good rookie running backs.
There's a lot of good veteran running backs.
There's a lot of good rookie running backs this year too.
Yeah, most of them got hurt.
Well,
so.
None of them were on your fantasy team, that's for sure.
That's for sure. I had nothing but old dudes like me, and there's a reason why I only won 2 or 3 ball games, whatever it was.
Let's get to the Spurs real quick because we're already going a little long. Spurs are now 17-16 after their win over the Clippers. I think it was 122-86, if I'm remembering correctly. 5 of their next 6 games on the road. Just talking about that Clippers win real quick. I think you and I were both insanely impressed. They shot like 22% from 3 and still won by 36 points.
Yeah, how does that happen? I'm still trying to figure that particular aspect out.
It was one of their best games from an effort standpoint, from a defensive standpoint, from a simpatico like relationship standpoint.
No matter who played, they played well together.
Yep.
There was not a single Spur on the negative side of the plus minus. Every Spur scored. They destroyed the Clippers on the boards, and they only had 9 turnovers. So, yeah, we were laughing because there were some stupid shots that they took in the third quarter. Guys feeling themselves. No need to out anybody.
No.
But overall,
It's a heat check.
it was like you can do that when you're kicking the other team's butt as bad as they were kicking the Clippers' butts.
Do you think that being home after a road trip had something to do with that, or is it a sustainable thing that they can
I hope
do that?
so. I mean, and you could say, well, the Clippers were coming off a back-to-back and they had to travel and all that, but bottom line is that was a hell of a performance by the Spurs. So, I don't know if they're going to be able to sustain this on the road, but, Mitch Johnson said the other night, hey, we were 1-3 on the road, and he felt like they made huge strides. So they're not really necessarily, even at this point, worried about the wins and the losses, that they feel like if they do similar things that they did like against the Clippers, then the wins are going to take care of themselves. So, if he felt like they made strides on the last road trip and then they backed it up with that performance on the Clippers, then, let's see what the next round of road games looks like.
You have it's not going to take long to get to it. You got 5 of the next 6 on the road. I believe Friday they're in Denver, and then they come home to play Denver, and then they're Milwaukee. I think it's Chicago, Milwaukee, and then 2 in LA. So you got to figure out how to win on the road, and they're going to get their chance to show that they can win on the road coming up. They're only 5-9 on the road this year. Like, it's not going to do it. You got a lot of home games early. You won a lot. You racked up some wins there.
Well said.
5-9 on the road.
They're going to have
to
be better on the road if they want to be a playoff
They have
team.
that, and they have the rodeo road trip to prove that they can win on the road. They have 2 games in Paris. They're technically on the road, but I don't know. I don't know why they play so much better at home. I really don't understand it.
No, most teams do, right? You got the fans
But
behind
not this.
you.
But not this chasm. Like it's a chasm of better effort and better shooting, and they're just so much better at home.
Well, maybe
at
if
everything.
they're playing this many road games, you're going to get into a rhythm of playing on the road.
Yeah.
So we'll see. All I know is everything that I saw last week was pointing in a positive direction. And the biggest point I thought that you made was the energy, right? No matter who played was getting after it.
Yeah.
That's all I want to see. Give me that, more of that, and then the other stuff will fall into place.
All right, well, that's all we got for you today on the Sneakers Cleats podcast. Remember to download, rate, review, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, tell a friend, tell an enemy. Apparently, I have to go find a wildebeest to fight or something, according to
Yes.
Chuck. So,
And a new remote.
and a new
That doesn't require tape.
We'll see you guys right back here on Monday.